Welcome to Catholic Connection with Theresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Theresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Theresa Tomeo.
And it's a Thursday. It's August 21st. Hope you're having a great day so far here on EWTN. Thanks for listening on this feast of St. Pius X. We'll talk a little bit more about him in the second hour of Catholic Connection. But just a little background. He was born of humble origins in Riese, Italy, that's in the Veneto region, so northeast Italy, back in 1835. As pastor, bishop, and patriarch of Venice, he countered laxness and error with the return to essentials, catechesis, and solid priestly formation. Upon his election as pope in 1903, he worked to restore all things in Christ, which was actually his motto. From Ephesians 1:10, he published a question and answer catechism, the fruit of his pastoral experience, and promoted the theology of St. Thomas Aquinas as a sure guide in a time of much confusion. He urged the frequent reception of communion and restored place of Gregorian chant in the liturgy. He died in 1914 and was canonized fairly quickly after that in 1954. Pope St. Pius X, pray for us. And again, a little bit more about this great saint in the second hour of Catholic Connection on a Thursday. First up, though, the one, the only Father Mitch Pacwa with our Cultural Connections joins us as he does every Thursday for two segments to take a look at what's happening in and around the world in the church and to give us his perspective. And then we're going to be discussing a new dating app. It's entitled Sacred Spark. And we're going to sit down and chat with a couple behind it, Emily and Daniel Wilson Hussem. They're joining us. And I think it's going to be a great discussion. I was on their website looking at it this morning. And you'll be, I think, very interested into how and why they came up with this idea, because there are other dating websites and dating apps out there for Catholics, but they're doing things differently. And they'll explain why they wanted to build on what's already being done, but to make it more user-friendly and to be able to have more people involved, maybe get your friends involved as well. I think it's very interesting, and I think it's super important, because in this day and age, the good Lord knows we need to be able to meet nice, like-minded people that share in our faith. That's so important in starting a relationship and especially a marriage. So that is the program for the first hour of Catholic Connection here on a Thursday, August 21st, a feast of St. Pius X. Father Mitch Pacwa for our Cultural Connections, and then one segment with Emily and Daniel Hussem on their new dating app, which is called, I love the name of it, Sacred Spark. So there you go. Well, Aaron is making headlines all over the place. National Weather Service saying the hurricane is moving away from the North Carolina coast, but leaving behind dangerous surf and rip currents that are continuing. And then out west, we have the story of the hazardous heat. So according to the National Weather Service, in terms of the forecast, tropical storm conditions, storm surge flooding, and coastal flooding continuing today across the Outer Banks and portions of the Mid-Atlantic. Life-threatening rip currents and high surf continue to impact much of the East Coast through the end of this week, and a hazardous record heat continuing across the western U.S. throughout the weekend. So there's your weather for you. It is a Thursday, and once again, we so appreciate your listenership. Do check out all of our great programming, radio, TV, online, that main website, EWTN. Speaking of which, on a Thursday morning, it's time to check the news on EWTN, so let's get started. Addressing the faithful gathered in Paul VI Hall for the weekly audience yesterday, the Holy Father turning his thoughts once more to the world's many conflicted zones in terms of violence and wars. As Catholic News Agency reports, he says in recalling the upcoming liturgical commemoration of the Queenship of Blessed Virgin Mary, which is celebrated on Friday, August 22nd, the Pope is inviting the faithful to celebrate that day by praying and fasting for peace. He said Mary is the mother of the faithful here on earth and is remembered as a queen of peace. He added, as our world continues to be wounded by wars in the Holy Land in Ukraine and other parts of the world, the Pope invited all faithful to take part in a day of prayer and fasting for all those who suffer because of war, imploring, he said, the Lord to grant us peace and justice and to wipe away the tears of those who suffer because of ongoing armed conflicts. Meanwhile, the Pope apparently is preparing to travel to Lebanon later this year in what could be his first journey abroad since being elected head of the Catholic Church back in May. The Archbishop there, deputy to Lebanon's highest-ranking Catholic leader, telling the British Broadcasting Corporation that the Vatican was studying the trip and that the Church was still waiting for some official dates. The visit would mark a significant moment for the first American Pope who has repeatedly urged peace in the Middle East and interfaith coexistence. Blake Sifton tells us Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has directed the military to shorten its timeline for the seizure of Gaza City.
Preliminary operations in the Gaza City neighborhood of Zaytun and the nearby city of Jabalia that began in recent days continue, with residents reporting heavy shelling. The Israeli military says they are now in control of Gaza City's outskirts. Meanwhile, Israeli media are reporting that the government have decided not to respond to the ceasefire proposal put forth by mediators and accepted by Hamas, and do not plan to send negotiators to Qatar or Egypt to take part in any talks. Blake Sifton, Tel Aviv.
Russia's foreign minister is insisting that Moscow must be a part of any international talks on Ukrainian security following that war. European leaders have been discussing ways to protect Ukraine after the Russian invasion comes to an end. President Trump calling for security guarantees as part of any deal to end the war. Yesterday, the Russian foreign minister called the European talks a clumsy effort to sway Trump and said discussing security guarantees with Russia was a road to nowhere. Russia has also said it would not accept the deployment of European forces to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is giving details on the visit of Ukrainian President Zelensky to the White House this week.
The president says, we've had a pretty good meeting. I'm going to go call Vladimir Putin and see what he says about it. And everybody's like, oh, you're going to call him next week? And he's like, no, what time is it in Moscow? Let's call him right now.
Vance saying on Fox News yesterday that he started things off with an icebreaker, telling Zelensky as long as he behaved, Vance wouldn't say anything. He continued by saying Ukrainians want security guarantees, as we mentioned earlier, while the Russians want a certain amount of territory. Vance went on to say the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is former President Biden's war. Another official in former President Biden's administration, meanwhile, is set to testify today in the GOP probe of the ex-president's mental fitness while in office. Ian Sams, a former special assistant to the former president, previously agreed to do a closed-door interview, but it's unknown if he will plead the fifth and not answer questions. That probe has been focused on Biden's mental decline and use of an auto pen. Republicans say that auto pen use may make some of Biden's pardons void. And Washington, D.C. will be putting a special youth curfew zone in place beginning tonight. Groups of more than 8 minors are banned from gathering inside the curfew zone. With some exceptions, a curfew zone will be in place through at least the rest of the weekend through Sunday night. The parents of the 27 girls who died at Camp Mystic in Austin, Texas area are urging Texas lawmakers to support a new bill to make summer camps safer. Michael McCowan, who lost his 8-year-old daughter in the July flooding, says there needs to be more protections in place.
We did not send Lenny to a war zone. We sent her to camp. We trusted she would be safe. No parent should ever again face what we are living through now.
State lawmakers are taking up a special package of bills to address that disaster. If passed, they would keep summer camps out of flood zones, require them to have emergency plans, and mandate both weather radios and warning sirens. And a judge is denying the Justice Department's request to unseal grand jury records from Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking case, keeping key evidence sealed despite renewed public interest. The DOJ recently confirming Epstein died by suicide and said no client list exists. President Trump last month directed the Attorney General to seek court approval for that release. And Mark Mayfield tells us, as we heard in the weather forecast, around 40 million people are under coastal flooding alerts as Hurricane Erin churns out in the Atlantic.
Evacuations have been ordered for North Carolina's Outer Banks, and a state of emergency has been declared as the storm's outer bands look to bring storm surge flooding to the region. Swimming at most East Coast beaches is being advised against due to life-threatening surf and rip currents. Tropical storm conditions are forecast in Virginia starting today. Erin has maximum sustained winds of 105 miles per hour, with the National Hurricane Center at last check putting the storm about 200 miles southeast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And as you just heard, swimming remains banned at many tri-state beaches and other areas along the coast as the hurricane creates high surf and dangerous rip currents. And in New Jersey, officials such as Seaside Heights Mayor Anthony Vaz is warning folks not to enter the water at all.
If you're in the water, we're going to ticket you, and maybe even more severe consequences.
Forecasters again say Erin could cause coastal flooding and beach erosion in the tri-state area from waves expected to be over 10 feet high at times. Forecasters say Atlantic, Cape May, Monmouth, and Ocean counties may see up to 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts. New York City beaches and state-run beaches on Long Island are also closed to swimming during the day. The Southwest, meanwhile, is headed into a major heat wave with some 80 million people under warnings and advisories from the southern border up into Utah. That state, along with Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, will see higher than average temps throughout the weekend. Now in Southern California, the heat warnings there started yesterday morning, with officials saying residents could see some of the hottest temperatures of the summer so far this year. Death Valley expected to reach 120 degrees, while Phoenix and Las Vegas will see 112 and 110 respectively. Daniel Martindale tells us a man from Pico Rivera, California, now facing a federal charge on suspicion of blocking ICE agents from detaining a janitor.
On Wednesday, a federal grand jury indicted 20-year-old Adrian Martinez, who is a U.S. citizen. He is charged with conspiracy to impede federal agents and will be arraigned today. Martinez was arrested on June 17th after allegedly interfering when a janitor was being detained by ICE agents at a shopping center in Pico Rivera. The U.S. Department of Justice says he and other people parked their vehicles to block the agents from leaving. Martinez could face up to 6 years in prison if he's convicted as charged. I'm Daniel Martindale.
And President Trump's immigration policies are putting a spotlight on crime committed by illegal immigrants. ICE detainer requests to jails are soaring as the new administration continues its immigration crackdown.
Somewhere between 8 million and 12 million removable aliens came into the United States.
That's Art Arthur with the Center for Immigration Studies says it's a numbers game. Detainer requests force jails to hold inmates until the feds can pick them up. The question going forward will be whether there is a detention bed space to accommodate them. This week, Texas opened up the Lone Star lockup at Fort Bliss. And the Texas Senate could vote on a congressional redistricting plan as soon as today. This after Texas House Republicans passed a plan to redraw congressional maps.
88 ayes and 52 nays. House Bill 4 is finally passed.
The State House reconvened yesterday after protests from Democrats that saw them leave the state to break quorum and delay a vote. The new congressional map would create 5 more Republican-leaning districts that is expected to be approved by the Senate there in Texas. A new survey says false information online is a major threat. According to the Pew Research Center, 70% of those polled say online misinformation is a major threat to national security. Terrorism being a major threat was polled at 61%. And the global economy's condition came in at 60%. Climate change and infectious diseases polled lowest at 50%. The survey was done March 24th to 30th. March 24th to the 30th of 2025, so conducted a few months ago. And CVS's pharmacy benefit manager Caremark will be paying almost $290 million for overcharging Medicare for prescriptions more than 10 years ago. A federal judge gave the order this week after the company was found liable back in June. Caremark was accused of manipulating how drug costs were reported, leading to false reports back in 2013 and 2014. We hope your Thursday is going well. The feast of St. Pope Pius X. Good to be with you on a Thursday, August 21st, 2025. Coming up, our regular Thursday guest, the amazing Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN and our Cultural Connections. And then we're also going to be taking a look, and this is very cool and I think very interesting if you have some people in your life that are single and maybe looking to meet other Catholics. Emily and Daniel Wilson Hussem will be joining us. The topic is Sacred Spark, a brand new app that will be launching next month regarding dating, and they'll tell us all about it. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you. Hope you're having a blessed day. It's August 21st. We'll be right back. Always a blessing and so informative. We have our friend Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN with us for our Cultural Connections. Father, good morning. Always great to have you on the Feast of St. Pius X. And that we have a lot of issues going on in the world, and I always love to get your perspective, a truly Catholic perspective. Our Holy Father calling for a day of prayer and fasting tomorrow for peace, looking at not only what's going on in the Middle East with Gaza and Israel, but also, of course, the developments in Ukraine or any movement toward peace. What are your thoughts after the meeting with President Trump and Vladimir Putin and then the gathering on Monday, which was a very quick turnaround? Trump called the leaders from Europe and they all came in, most of them. Right. And they called it a very successful meeting, but things are still, looks like there's still a lot of work to do in those areas.
Oh, 100%. There's going to be a lot that needs to be dealt with for a good while. But there is a positive move. And I think both the what the president himself keeps saying, what his wife had also written to Vladimir Putin about the importance of stopping the killing. These are thousands and thousands of, I think by this point, millions of lives that have been lost. For what? It's a stalemate like World War I, where they're fairly stable. And at what point is the land and the minerals and oil and all that, at what point is all of this spending of human life and other resources make this not worthwhile? That should have been the consideration way back. Now, we have to deal with some issues. These same areas of Ukraine were that the Russians want to annex. These had been brought up for negotiation back in 1991 when the Soviet Union was collapsing. Soviet Union was falling apart, and in the midst of, I don't know how well you remember these days when Boris Yeltsin was trying to rally people of Russia against a rebellion by staunch communists who wanted everything to stay Soviet Union, and that rebellion failed, and the different Soviet it would be the equivalent of a state in our country, roughly. That's why it was called the Soyuz Sovietsky, the Union of Socialist States, and these were just falling away all over the Soviet Union and becoming independent countries like Azerbaijan and Armenia and Georgia, and Ukraine was pretty much one of the big leaders of that because they were the biggest Soviet outside of Russia, and Russia itself was one Soviet, and so all that's fallen apart. And during that time, Gorbachev tried to negotiate getting the Donbass region and all as part of Russia. The reason was the border for that area had been drawn long before the breakdown of the Soviet Union, that the Ukrainian Soviet was already established as borders. But Stalin had killed millions of Ukrainians, and he deported millions of others because they didn't really like communism. And so by starving 6 million people, I think in 1933, just taking all their food, confiscating it, and leaving 6 million people, men, women, and children, to starve to death, emptied out the place, as well as taking others from Donbass and the other regions in that eastern area. And he replaced them with Russians. Stalin did, that is. And it still has a strong Russian population, but it was inside the borders. It would be roughly equivalent to Texas as an independent state within the United States.
Okay, that makes
sense.
That
border is there. But then there are large sections where they're along the border, for instance, where it's very heavily Mexican American and Texan, or as some call them Texicans, that they're the Mexican background, and they say, look, we don't want to be part of Texas. We're separating this part off. That's roughly what this would be equivalent to. So it's not Ukrainians living there so much, but they're Ukrainian citizens even though they're Russian background. And this is the complicated mess that has been inherited. And frankly, one of the things that happened is President George Walker Bush, approved, the first Bush, approved of this separation of Ukraine. He was getting pressure here from Ukrainian Americans as well as from the government of Ukraine. And he, said that they should be independent, supported it. He got Gorbachev all angry with him. But the Soviet Union was just falling apart, and Gorbachev was the president of the Soviet Union, while Yeltsin was the president of Russia, and basically the Soviet Union disappeared, and Russia became its own separate country and stronger. But Yeltsin and Putin never liked each other. The infighting that was going on within these countries was very complicated. And there's a guy named Sergei Plokhov, Plokhov, who has written a detailed history of all this complicated stuff. If you're interested in understanding the background, Plokhov has 2 books on this. I strongly recommend him for just laying out what happened in this falling apart. Well, this, the tension then is, would Ukraine join NATO like Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia did, and Poland, and these other East European countries? They gave up communism and the totalitarianism from Soviet Union, and they became part of NATO. And that pushed Russia even further back and made them a small. And Russia's population continues to diminish. They're also weak in terms of their population decline. They have so much abortion and stuff that their population is way smaller than it was at the beginning of World War II. Wow. And so this is another issue. And also Russia, their medical system fell apart in the mid-'90s and all this. Well, in the face of all of this going on, you also see that President Clinton promised Ukraine, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we will guarantee the integrity of your borders. That was in 1994. Because they didn't want, nuclear weapons are so dangerous. And if you have somebody go crazy and they start dropping bombs on somebody, or if they are, looking for more land, they drop bombs. We took that away. We asked them to give it up. They did, with a protection from us, but we didn't protect them in President Obama's term when they took Crimea. The Russians took Crimea, and we didn't protect them now in the time of President Biden when they took invaded
Father, hang
the
on. We're
country.
going to take a break. We'll continue with this excellent background and get your insight on the prayers for tomorrow that the Pope is calling for. We'll be right back. Having a great conversation with Father Mitch Pacwa, our very own Father Mitch Pacwa. Really needs no introduction. Of course, one of our most popular radio and TV hosts here at EWTN, author, scripture scholar, and just a wonderful pastor with a pastor's heart. And he just told me about a very interesting anniversary for you today, Father. We got to get that in. This is a great sidebar story, not related to Russia or Ukraine or peace, but
no.
Well, it is actually, because we're glad we have you praying for peace as a wonderful priest on International Network. So, what's the anniversary today?
Today's the anniversary of my last date.
Ah, okay.
Who remembers August 20th, 1968, 7 o'clock? You forget all the details.
Mm-hmm.
Eileen Corcoran, sweet girl. You forget all about that stuff.
Well, we're sorry for Eileen, but we're very happy for the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So thanks for saying yes to the priesthood. All right, you gave us a great background in terms of getting a general but brief understanding. It's very hard to wrap that up in like 9 minutes, but you did a very good job. So tomorrow, the Holy Father calling for a very special day of prayer and fasting, calling on the intercession of Our Lady, Queen of Peace. I think this is important because it helps us really kind of refocus, because we were talking during the break, sometimes we hear about these international conflicts and they're so big. I mean, these superpowers that are involved, and you have Europe and Russia and the United States and Ukraine, and you've got the situation in Gaza and Israel. You're like, I can't even, what am I supposed to do with this, Lord? Well, we take everything to Jesus and pray, right?
Yeah, well, and see, this is one of the things. We, as a church, and as individuals, should not be looking at all towards this call for more land, protecting land. That's not our concern. We are pro-life in every aspect. That includes making sure that the people who are in Ukraine, men, women, and children, and the people of Russia, we don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to die. That would be a truly wicked thing. We want all of them to live well and to have long, full lives. We want them to be pro-life in terms of, their political philosophy and their economic philosophy, and that includes not killing people in combat. These are concerns, and what we want to do is be part of that growth and development. So this is one thing that we want to keep in mind. Secondly, we also want this to be true for the people of Gaza. We don't care about some ideology. We care about these people who live in a place like Gaza and who very much need to have their lives, as well as the people of Israel. Being in favor of Gaza is not, and being in favor of the Gazans does not mean being anything that is anti-Israeli. It's not something that is about, hating anybody. We cannot include hatred of any group within our orbit. That would be false. We instead are concerned with justice for the Gazan people, the Israeli people, freedom from attack, freedom to raise your family and have a decent life. This is our concern. And of course, if possible, we would love to see the people of Gaza and Israel alike grow in a love of God and in their faith. This is crucial for us.
It just seems still so far off, and this is a conflict, especially with Israel and Gaza, well, in terms of the Middle East, it's just so old historically, and I think sometimes people get worn out. What can we do to make sure that we're not just getting tired of these stories and all the sad news and bad news that comes out of certain parts of the world? And that's why, again, I think that this day of peace is really important, and the church raising money for the children of Gaza.
Well, you have to, that's it. You just said it. Remember that these are not the politicians that we're fighting for. We are concerned for the welfare of Israeli and Palestinian men, women, and children, the elderly, people who lose their homes, people who lose their lives, their loved ones. What the Israelis suffered in the attack, on October 7th, a couple years ago, was outrageous. And this is something that we never want to see changed. or to happen again. We don't want that kind of horror to be imposed on anyone. And when you look at places like Gaza, there is no way that we should want people to be without a home. There's no way that we should want them to be without substance. This is something that has to be our value, as it is in Ukraine. And there's just such horrible killing. Again, whether you like the president or not, ending wars in Azerbaijan versus Armenia, in Congo and Rwanda, in Sudan, between Egypt and Ethiopia. He said something very important. He says, "Some people tell me that I'll have a lot of trouble getting to heaven, but I want to end these wars and let St. Peter know that, and let our Lord know that I really have tried." Mm-hmm. And he wants to do what's good because it's good. This is something everybody should keep in mind. Our immortal souls are at risk of being lost for lack of care of these different needs. This is a very, very important set of principles, and we want to have that kind of care brought back to our politics. That care for life rather than, what looks like success, failure, etc., according to certain political principles. Mm-hmm. That is something we don't ever want to submit to those political and economic concerns at the cost of the lives of innocent people.
Yeah. Well said, Father. Thank you so much. And again, there are stories, of course, on EWTN's different websites and news sites regarding the Day of Peace, prayer for peace tomorrow. Catholic News Agency has a full report. Vatican News has it. Of course, we'll have more tonight on EWTN News Nightly and all of our programs, including The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. This is a very, very big effort the Holy Father is calling for us to pray for peace, and to fast on Friday. And again, for more information, you can check out the reports on Catholic News Agency and our other outlets. We'll be right back on a Thursday morning, August 21st. We're talking up next about a new dating app called Sacred Spark. We'll tell you all about it. Minutes past the hour. It is a Thursday morning, August 21st, 2025. Theresa Farnan here, Catholic Connection, and we keep you connected. Hence the name of the program, as I always say. Emily and Daniel Wilson Hussem are intending to keep people connected or get them connected through a brand new, beautiful app that is for Catholic relationships, and it is entitled Sacred Spark. And my understanding is, and Daniel, I'll go to you first, that you're going to launch this in a few weeks, right? Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, good morning. Yes, we will be launching Sacred Spark at the end of September, so we are very, very excited to get closer and closer each day.
Now, Emily, you and Daniel, you were just telling me, have been married for 10 years, and you have a family. And what prompted, I know you're both in ministry, and we'll get to that a little bit later on, but what prompted this interest in providing something new on the dating app scene?
Absolutely. For many years, I've been in ministry. I've been walking in ministry with people for about 14 years now. And I've seen over time how much more difficult it's been for Catholics to meet other on-fire Catholics. I've seen this problem just compound over the years. And we really wanted to do something about not only helping single Catholics connect, but to really help guide them on their dating journey. It's been such a beautiful thing to see how many Catholic singles desire the vocation of marriage. And so we really looked at each other and we thought, how can we help fix this problem for the church? Let's do it. We felt a real strong call from the Lord to do this, and that's why we created Sacred Spark.
So, Daniel, what's different about Sacred Spark? Because, as you know, I'm sure you did your research, as anyone would do, to developing a new product. Basically, there are other resources out there online, aren't there, for Catholics trying to meet other Catholics?
Yeah, no, 100%. And so there's a lot of things that make Sacred Spark different. And so for us, it's the most important thing, obviously, that it's authentically Catholic, but then also that we're doing it in a new approach. And so we're not trying to repackage something that, hasn't worked in the past. We're here to raise the standard and really redefine what modern Catholic dating should be in this digital space that, we find ourselves in. And so just a few features that I'll name that make it very different is this unique matchmaking feature. So we want it to really be something that the community is involved in as well, and really blend technology and tradition together, and allow you as a single to not have to go through the journey on your own, but have your close friends and family help carry the load with you and invite them to be your personal matchmakers on the application as well. And so it's something where we, again, combine those two worlds and really focus on online connections for offline relationships. And so, there's features like that just make it really stand out, but also really focus on intentionality, keeping it very personal and very purpose-driven and human as well. And having that human component in the digital space is extremely important.
So, Emily, this like your friends can be your matchmakers. They can help you out and give them their thoughts on the person you're trying to reach out to?
Yes, you can invite, say, my name is Marissa, and I'm a single 37-year-old gal, and I have a friend named Sarah, and I invite Sarah to be my matchmaker on the app. Sarah can hop in the app, and she can look through potential matches for me, kind of like blending technology with tradition to say, just like you were set up by someone. And so Marissa can say, hey, Sarah, will you look through these guys, see who might be good for me? If Sarah finds James and James has a matchmaker, Sarah can talk with James's matchmaker to say, hey, I have this friend Marissa. This is what she's like. Do you think she and James would be a good fit? And then they can go from there. It's a beautiful way to bring what's happened for so many years in connecting people into the digital space and have our singles feel supported, feel championed, and feel like there are people with them on the journey who want to help them meet a beautiful Catholic person.
So, Daniel, what about the ages? Because I'm sure there's singles of all ages that are looking, to be connected with someone who has a similar faith system. Are there different sections within the app that, depending on the age differences?
Yeah, so as we see now, so we have a wait list open with thousands and thousands of singles on it, and so now we're at approximately 88% in the age ranges between 18 and 35 years old, so it's definitely skewing towards that age range, but we're not prohibiting anybody from a certain age for joining the application. And so users within the app, singles can go and set certain age filters as well, but again, we're not prohibiting anybody at any age from joining.
And so what do you have to do, Emily, to get started on the app? How does it work?
So right now, today, anybody can join the wait list. That is available via sacredspark.app. And not only that, if you join the wait list today, we have a free resource. It's called Dating 101. Not only do we want to help Catholics connect with one another, we want to help heal the dating culture and transform the dating culture. In these 14 years of ministry, I realized too many people weren't told how to date. They weren't guided in what healthy dating looks like. So when singles go to sacredspark.app, they're put on the wait list. When we launch at the end of September, that's what we're planning for and working toward, they will be available to download the app. Then they can set up their profile, and then they can get connecting and hopefully start something good with another single Catholic on Sacred Spark.
That's awesome. We're talking with Emily Wilson Hussem and her husband, Daniel Hussem. We're talking about their new app that will be launching in September, Sacred Spark. Daniel, in terms of, we hear all these horror stories, and I'm sure you looked at all this as well, but this is kind of just to give some more background and to comfort people a bit, because let's say they're not all that great with technology, although most young people are, I would say. But if they're a little bit, maybe if they've been burned by another dating app or another site, what kind of protections, what do you advise people to do if they have some of those concerns?
Yeah, what I would advise them to do is obviously put this at the foreground because in anything in our world, right, we want everybody using Sacred App to feel safe and to feel confident in connecting with others. And so what also makes Sacred Spark different is that we don't just ask users to verify through email or phone and kind of hope for the best. We're also utilizing in-app video verification to ensure that singles are who they actually say that they are, as well. Just again in the digital age and using technology and so forth. So yeah, those are other components that we're building in.
Emily, you said some very interesting things, and I wanted to pick up especially what you said about how people didn't know how to date. What did you mean by that? I'm thinking that because I've interviewed a lot of psychologists and experts on this where it wasn't dating, it was just literally jumping into, heaven forbid, God forbid, sexual relations ASAP. I'm not saying that's happening with the Catholics that are signing up for Catholic websites, but that's the pressure that they're under and that they're facing, because that's the assumption. You just meet somebody and then you sleep with them. I mean, you hear that all the time. What else are you seeing out there? What are you seeing out there in terms of why you want to change the dating culture?
Yeah, the reason we called the course for Sacred Spark Dating 101 is because at its most basic level, what I have found is, any single saying to me, people jump into the dating pool and they aren't even emotionally ready for a relationship. They're not in any way, shape, or form ready to give and receive what needs to be given and received in a relationship. So what we're encouraging singles to do is take a deep inner look at your heart. Not only the question of, am I ready to date? Because if I'm not ready to date and I'm just in a place where I'm a big mess and I jump into the dating pool, it's going to lead to hurt and it's going to lead to confusion and it's going to contribute more to the mess of the dating culture rather than less. Beyond that, one of the things that we really encourage singles to do is look at, what am I really looking for in a person and what really matters in a sacramental marriage. So often I have found singles, say to me, they say, I've gotten off track and, the most important thing I'm looking for is the exterior of a person. I just want my husband to be 6'2" and, love dogs and have a great smile. And I've asked so many women over the years, it's okay? Yes, sure. It's really good to be physically attracted to the person that you're marrying. But is what you're looking for the most crucial part of a sacramental marriage? Helping singles really get into the nitty-gritty of the desires of their heart beyond what the culture says the desires of our heart should be in another person is so important. And I think it really encourages singles to take dating in a more intentional way, in a more healthy way, and in a more holy way. And that's what we're all about at Sacred Spark.
So in addition, obviously, to do interviews such as this one, how else are you getting the word out? And what about different dioceses around the country having access or talking about this? What are you seeing and hearing in the church? Daniel, I'll go to you.
Yeah. So how we're launching Sacred Spark is different as well. And so we're actually launching at the end of September on a diocese-by-diocese approach. And so what that means is for any dating component like this to work, you need three things. You need males, you need females, and you need them in a set vicinity. And so we're launching on a diocese-by-diocese basis, and we actually have a live tracker on our website at sacredspark.app where singles can see exactly the road of their diocese to unlocking at launch. And so that has created this momentum in a lot of these different dioceses all across America to help support their singles to get their diocese unlocked so that the singles in their community can get full access to Sacred Spark right at launch. And so a lot of the word has been getting out just organically through word of mouth, as well as our social channels at Sacred Spark app has been getting a lot of traction, and that shows the great need for something like this, and also the great, with the momentum that we're seeing, the great need, but the great, just excitement around this from the Catholic community to come and band together and help support their singles, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, I love that what it says on your website. Our mission is simple: help build up the church one relationship at a time. Emily, I'll go back to you. And my husband and I, we're a deacon couple, and we do a lot of work in the marriage area. We work with couples in our own parish, but we also do a lot of retreats on marriage. And one relationship that is troubled and broken can have such a negative ripple effect. So what you're doing is really, really important.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your ministry. I think the Wives of Deacons, I love meeting you all at conferences and events and retreats because I think that the work that you do is so important and so beautiful to support your deacon husbands, and I don't think you're given enough credit. I know you're not looking for credit, but to all you deacons' wives out there, I just wanted to say a special shout out to you today. You do so much for the church, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you. But again, I think, both of us in your line of work and what you're doing in your ministry, your individual ministry, Emily, which is beautiful, your books and your talks, and then Daniel, what you're doing in media, and we have to have you back on for your other projects, because I really wanted to hit this hard this morning in this app because it's so important. But again, both of you, if you want to comment, as we have about a minute left, one relationship, Emily, it really can, whether it's positive, it can set off a positive spark, hence the name, right, of your app, or it can do something in a very negative way, right?
Absolutely. You think about throwing a rock in a lake and the ripple effect just of that one stone into the lake. It is true for every relationship, and that's why we want positive, beautiful, holy relationships in the church, because it does. It impacts our parishes. It impacts our communities. It impacts immediate families and extended families to really change the world. Bringing two holy Catholics together can change generations of people, which is such a thrill to think about.
I'm so happy you guys are doing this. God bless you both. And I think you're offering a great resource. So again, this will launch in September. Daniel, I'll let you have the last word in terms of what people need to do. Just go to the website, correct?
Yes. Go to sacredspark.app, and then there's just join the waitlist from there, and then we'll see you guys at the end of September on the application.
Can't wait to see where this goes. I think it's going to be amazing. Thanks to both of you for all of your great work and for thinking of not only the church now, but the church in the future. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection on a Thursday. Appreciate your listenership. It's August 21st, and we will keep you posted on that sacred app, that technology that's being made available, a different type of dating for Catholics, a dating app, and very safe, and certainly a great way, and you can have your friends weigh in. That would be a lot of fun, too, to have your friend's opinion on someone that might be a good match. Matchmaker, make me a match. I think that was from... That's how old I am, Fiddler on the Roof, if I'm not mistaken. And that song popped into my head when I was doing the interview. Anyhow, I digress. Coming up in the second hour of the program this morning, we are going to take a little bit of a close-up look at our saint of the day, St. Pius X, who is from the beautiful region of Veneto, where Venice is. So if you're looking at your Italy map, obviously that's in the northeast. But that whole area up there is just fascinating because everybody thinks of the Veneto region and they just think of Venice, but there's so much more to that. He started out very humble beginnings and then worked in his ministry in Venice. And then when he became Pope, he was just someone who believed so strongly in recatechizing, or catechizing to begin with. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. We have a short video that we will play. Obviously, it's radio, so it'll be theater of the mind and you'll hear the audio. But I always think it's super interesting to find out a little bit more about the saints. We were just talking in the second hour of the program yesterday with Dr. Carlo Broussard, who was on, of course, EWTN Live last night with Father Mitch Pacwa and on Catholic Connection, about the importance of the saints and the intercession. Maybe you're in catechism, maybe you are teaching, or you're leading OCIA. This would be a great saint for you to call on his help and support. And then we'll also take a look at what's being done in terms of trying to get OBGYNs to be more open to all life. Yeah, I know. Can't believe I made that statement. We'll explain when we come back. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Theresa Farnan, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Theresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Theresa Farnan.
And we continue the Thursday edition of Catholic Connection, August 21st, here on EWTN's Radio Extra. We're so glad you're with us. Hope you're doing well. Today is a feast day of Pope St. Pius X, and we will be taking a look at his life and his dedication to strong catechesis, getting back to the basics, And then we'll also let you know where he is buried. So if you're going to Rome, maybe for the end of the Jubilee year, can you believe we only have a few months left in 2025, but there's still plenty of time to get there, especially if you have a pilgrimage or whatnot coming up. Maybe when you're in St. Peter's, you can go to the tomb of the many saints. There are so many of them buried there. It's incredible. But anyway, I just find him very encouraging in terms of his whole ministry as Pope was all about Jesus. Now I know, okay, he's the vicar of Christ, but what I'm saying is he was trying to get people back to the basics. And he says you can't do it first and foremost without Jesus, and you cannot do it without the church he founded. Pretty powerful stuff. Okay, I'm going to read a beautiful reflection that was on the Magnificat today. In the Magnificat daily mass readings, I always have a beautiful reflection, and sometimes I have words of the saint of the day. And then we're going to share a short video with you with a little bit more background and talk about his dedication to getting back to the basics, starting with Jesus. Yay, Jesus. And then we are going to be taking a look at a story that is disturbing, but it's reality in the medical world and in the world in general. We're going to be talking with PhD Theresa Farnan. She's been on with us before. She is a wonderful pro-life representative of the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Faith. She's going to be talking about prenatal screening and how she had in her life, when she was expecting her 10th child, had an OBGYN said they were going to do the prenatal screening to weed out Down syndrome. What that really means is to encourage an abortion if we find that your child could be born with Down syndrome. It's just terrific, but oh my gosh, what courage she had and how she is working on this issue. And we will give you more information about Dr. Theresa because she has a great desire for the truth, and she works with the Person and Identity Project and also has worked with the Vatican as well on pro-life issues. That is our show for today on a Tuesday morning. We so appreciate your listenership. Weather-wise, we have some issues out there, folks. We have Hurricane Aaron moving away from North Carolina, but we still have dangerous surf and rip currents thanks to that hurricane, and then hazardous heat. I mean, really, really, really hot temperatures out west. So here's what they're saying for the full forecast from the National Weather Service. Tropical storm conditions, storm surge flooding, and coastal flooding continuing today across the Outer Banks and portions of the Mid-Atlantic coast. Life-threatening rip currents. I mean, this is serious stuff. You can't be messing around with this. I mean, if you've ever been caught in a current, a strong current in the ocean, which I have, it's pretty scary. Life-threatening rip currents and high surf continue to impact much of the East Coast through the end of the week, and then hazardous record heat will continue across the western part of the country, and that will be throughout the weekend. And we will have complete details for you also in some news stories coming up, which we are going to get to right now. It is a Thursday morning. It's August 21st, 2025. You're listening to Catholic Connection, the second hour here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Let's check the news. Well, we discussed this with Father Mitch Pacwa in the first hour of the program, addressing the faithful gathered in Paul VI Hall for his weekly general audience. Pope Leo XIV turning his thoughts once more to the world's many conflict zones. In recalling the upcoming liturgical commemoration of the Queenship of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which is celebrated tomorrow, Friday, August 22nd, the Holy Father inviting the faithful around the world to celebrate that day by praying and fasting for peace. He said, Mary is a mother of the faithful here on earth and is remembered as the Queen of Peace. He added, as our world continues to be wounded by wars in the Holy Land, in Ukraine, and in other parts of the world, I invite all the faithful to take part in a day of prayer and fasting for all those who suffer because of those wars. He implored the Lord to grant us peace and justice and to wipe away the tears of those who suffer because of ongoing armed conflicts. The Pope, meanwhile, also preparing apparently to travel to Lebanon later this year in what could be his first journey abroad since being elected head of the Catholic Church back in May. The Archbishop deputy to Lebanon's highest-ranking leader telling the BBC that the Vatican was studying the trip but that the Church was still waiting for official dates. The visit would mark a significant moment for the first American Pope, who has repeatedly urged peace in the Middle East and interfaith coexistence. Meanwhile, Blake Sifton tells us, speaking of peace or possible peace, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has directed the military to shorten its timeline for the seizure of Gaza.
Preliminary operations in the Gaza City neighborhood of Zaytun and the nearby city of Jabalia that began in recent days continue, with residents reporting heavy shelling. The Israeli military says they are now in control of Gaza City's outskirts. Meanwhile, Israeli media are reporting that the government have decided not to respond to the ceasefire proposal put forth by mediators and accepted by Hamas, and do not plan to send negotiators to Qatar or Egypt to take part in any talks. Blake Sifton, Tel Aviv.
And moving on in our newscast this morning on a busy Thursday, Russia's foreign minister is insisting that Moscow must be a part of any international talks on Ukrainian security following the war. European leaders have been discussing ways to protect Ukraine after the Russian invasion comes to an end. President Trump calling for security guarantees as part of any deal to end the war. Yesterday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov calling the European talks a clumsy effort to sway Trump, and said discussing security guarantees without Russia was simply a road to nowhere. Russia has also said it would not accept the deployment of European forces to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is giving details on the visit Ukrainian President Zelensky took to the White House earlier this week.
The president says, we've had a pretty good meeting. I'm going to go call Vladimir Putin and see what he says about it. And everybody's like, oh, you're going to call him next week? And he's like, no, what time is it in Moscow? Let's call him right now.
Vance saying on Fox News yesterday that he started things off with an icebreaker, telling Zelensky as long as he behaved, Vance wouldn't say anything. He continued by saying Ukrainians want security guarantees while the Russians want a certain amount of territory. Vance went on to say the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is the problem of the former president, Joe Biden. Meanwhile, another official in the former president's administration is set to testify today in the GOP probe of Biden's mental fitness while in office. Ian Sams, a former special assistant to Biden, previously agreeing to do a closed-door interview, but it's unknown if he will plead the fifth and not answer questions. The probe has been focused on Biden's mental decline and use of an auto pen. Republicans say that auto pen use may make some of Biden's pardons void. Washington, D.C. will be put on a special youth curfew zone in place beginning tonight. Groups of more than 8 minors are banned from gathering inside that zone. With some exceptions, a curfew zone will be in place through at least Sunday night. The parents of the 27 girls who died at Camp Mystic are urging Texas lawmakers to support a new bill to make summer camps safer. Michael McCown, who lost his 8-year-old daughter in the July flooding, says there needs to be more protection in places like that.
We did not send Lenny to a war zone. We sent her to camp. We trusted she would be safe. No parent should ever again face what we are living through now.
State lawmakers are taking up a package of bills to address a disaster. If passed, they would keep summer camps out of flood zones, require them to have emergency plans, and mandate both weather radios and warning sirens. A judge is denying the Justice Department's request to unseal grand jury records from Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking case, keeping key evidence sealed despite renewed public interest. The DOJ recently confirmed Epstein died by suicide and said no client list actually exists. President Trump last month did direct the Attorney General to seek court approval for the release. Mark Mayfield tells us around 40 million people are under coastal flood alerts as Hurricane Erin churns out in the Atlantic.
Evacuations have been ordered for North Carolina's Outer Banks, and a state of emergency has been declared as the storm's outer bands look to bring storm surge flooding to the region. Swimming at most East Coast beaches is being advised against due to life-threatening surf and rip currents. Tropical storm conditions are forecast in Virginia starting today. Erin has maximum sustained winds of 105 miles per hour, with the National Hurricane Center at last check putting the storm about 200 miles southeast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Meanwhile, swimming remains banned at many tri-state beaches as Hurricane Erin creates high surf and dangerous rip currents, as you heard. In New Jersey, for example, officials such as Seaside Heights Mayor Anthony Vaz warning folks not to enter the water.
If you're in the water, we're going to ticket you, and maybe even more severe consequences.
Forecasters again say Erin could cause coastal flooding and beach erosion in the tri-state area from waves expected to be over 10 feet high at times. Forecasters saying the Atlantic, Cape May, Monmouth, and Ocean counties may see up to 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts. New York City beaches and state-run beaches on Long Island are also closed to swimming, at least for today. The Southwest is headed, meanwhile, into a big heat wave with some 80 million people under warnings there and advisories from the southern border all the way up to Utah. That state, along with Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, will all see higher than average temperatures through the weekend. In Southern California, heat warnings started yesterday morning, with officials saying residents could see some of the hottest temperatures of the summer. Death Valley is expected to reach 120 degrees, and that'll happen tomorrow, while Phoenix and Las Vegas could go up to 112, and 110, respectively. Daniel Martindale tells us a man from Pico Rivera, California, now facing a federal charge on suspicion of blocking ICE agents from detaining a janitor.
On Wednesday, a federal grand jury indicted 20-year-old Adrian Martinez, who is a U.S. citizen. He is charged with conspiracy to impede federal agents and will be arraigned today. Martinez was arrested on June 17th after allegedly interfering when a janitor was being detained by ICE agents at a shopping center in Pico Rivera. The U.S. Department of Justice says he and other people parked their vehicles to block the agents from leaving. Martinez could face up to 6 years in prison if he's convicted as charged. I'm Daniel Martindale.
President Trump's immigration policies are putting a spotlight on crime committed by illegal immigrants. ICE detainer requests to jails are soaring as the Trump administration continues its immigration crackdown.
Somewhere between 8 million and 12 million removable aliens came into the United States.
Art Arthur with the Center for Immigration Studies says detainer requests force jails to hold inmates until the feds can pick them up. The question going forward will be whether there is a detention bed space to accommodate them. This week, Texas opened the Lone Star lockup, and they opened that in the Fort Bliss area. And the Texas Senate could vote on a congressional redistricting plan as soon as today. This after Texas House Republicans passed the plan to redraw congressional maps.
88 ayes and 52 nays. House Bill 4 is finally passed.
The State House reconvening yesterday after protests from Democrats that saw them leave the state to break quorum and delay a vote. The new congressional map would create 5 more Republican-leaning districts and is expected to be approved by the Senate. And a new survey says false information online is indeed a major threat. According to the Pew Research Center, 70% of those polled say online misinformation is a major threat to national security. Terrorism being a major threat was polled at 61%, and the global economy's condition came in at 60%, so-called climate change and infectious diseases polling lowest at 50%. The survey was conducted in late March of this year. And CVS's health pharmacy benefit manager, Caremark, will pay almost $290 million for overcharging Medicare for prescriptions more than 10 years ago. A federal judge giving the order this week after the company was found liable back in June. Caremark was accused of manipulating how drug costs were reported, leading to false reports back in both 2013 and 2014. It is a Thursday morning. It's August 21st, 2025. We appreciate your listenership for both hours of the program, including this second hour on EWTN's Radio Extra. Coming up, we're going to take a look at our saint of the day, Pope Pius X, St. Pope Pius X. Some beautiful things about this wonderful leader who cared so much about getting back to the basics of the faith and did whatever he could to make sure that happened, at least in his lifetime. We'll be right back on a Thursday. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, on a Thursday morning. It's August 21st, 2025. And you know, if you listen to this show, how much I love the saints. I just think they're amazing witnesses for us, for everyone here on God's green earth. And I don't think that we call on them nearly often enough. And so I really like to feature them, especially ones with whom I'm not that familiar, including, for example, aware of Pope Pius X, but did some more background and research on him this morning. And there's a beautiful, beautiful meditation, so we'll start with that from him. And then after we play a short video from Rome Reports for you, I'll have a little bit more background information. Here's this reflection from Pope Pius X, and he was very much concerned about atheism and things that were happening at the turn of the century, the turn of the 20th century, late 1800s, early 1900s, very, very concerned about it. And so that's why he was so consumed with getting people back to the basics, starting with the relationship with Christ. And this is from, I believe, let me check the bottom of this. Yes, this is actually from his first encyclical on the restoration of all things in Christ. It's just beautiful. Maybe you can look it up and pray over that today. Since it has been pleasing to the divine will to raise our lowliness to such sublimity of power, we take courage in him who strengthens us, and setting ourselves to work, relying on the power of God, We proclaim that we have no other program but that of restoring all things in Christ, Ephesians 1:10, so that Christ may be all and in all, Colossians 3:11. But we shall never, however much we exert ourselves, succeed in calling men back to the majesty and empire of God, except by means of Jesus Christ. No one, the apostle admonishes us, can lay other foundation than that which has been laid, which is Jesus Christ. It is Christ alone whom the Father sanctified and sent into this world, John 10:36. The splendor of the Father in the image of his substance, Hebrews 1:3. True God and true man, without whom nobody can know God with the knowledge for salvation. Hence it follows that to restore all things in Christ and to lead men back to submission to God are one and the same aim. Now the way to reach Christ is not hard to find. It is the church. Rightly does St. John Chrysostom say, the church is your hope. The church is your salvation. The church is your refuge. It was for this that Christ founded it, gaining it at the price of his blood, and made it the depository of his doctrine and his laws, bestowing upon it at the same time an inexhaustible treasury of grace for the sanctification and salvation of men. You see, then, the duty that we all have of bringing back human society to the discipline of the church. Then we shall rejoice to see evil giving place to good, and hear for our gladness a loud voice from heaven saying, Now have salvation and power come in the kingdom of our God and the authority of his anointed, Revelation 12:10. But if our desire to obtain this is to be fulfilled, we must use every means and exert all our energy to restore to their ancient place of honor the most holy laws and counsels of the gospel, and to proclaim aloud the truths taught by the Church. St. Pius X. He reigned as Pope from 1903 to 1914, and again, what we just read was from his first encyclical on the restoration of all things Christ. Let's share with you a little bit more background through this story that was done by Rome Reports earlier this year regarding Pope Pius X. Gives you a little insight as to why perhaps Pope Francis, shortly before he died, visited his tomb in St. Peter's. Here we go.
Who is St. Pius X, the Pope whose tomb Pope Francis prayed at? St. Pius X is known for many things. He is mainly praised for promoting the Catechism and the Code of Canon Law, and also reforming the Curia. He is also the pontiff who is said to have died of sorrow, as he passed away shortly after World War I started. His passing was described in 2014 by then President of the Pontifical Committee of Historical Sciences.
Everyone thought they would win the war, so soldiers thought they would soon be back at home with their families. In a way, you could say the Pope died of grief between the night of the 20th and the 21st of August back in 1914, just 3 weeks after World War I started. He knew there would be a slaughter.
On a pastoral level, he took measures such as allowing more frequent reception of communion and promoting a greater understanding of the Catechism in order to address the atheistic and agnostic currents of his time.
A short video on Pope Pius X, who was buried in St. Peter's Basilica. And I found this summary on his life, which I thought was just beautiful. A little bit more to add on what was said in that report from Rome Reports. He is known for having compiled the catechism that bears his name, for granting communion to children from the age of 7, and for promoting important reforms within the Church. This is St. Pius X, born Giuseppe Sarto. He was born in Riese, in the province of Treviso, in the region of Veneto, that is in northeastern Italy, of course, and encompasses the city of Venice. He was born in 1835, the first of 10 children, a family of humble oranges, poor but not destitute, at least in the early years. From an early age, Giuseppe, which means Joseph actually in Italian, displayed remarkable intelligence which allowed him to excel in elementary school and open up the possibility of continuing his studies. His vocation to the priesthood was nurtured within his family, but it immediately collided with a lack of financial means, which would have prevented him from entering the seminary. He was supported by the Patriarch of Venice, though, also a native of his town, who, upon learning of the young boy's talents, offered him a scholarship to attend the seminary in Padua. There, during his 8 years of study, he once again distinguished himself with excellent academic results. Those years, though, were marked by a painful event, the premature death of his father, which plunged the family into severe poverty. His mother became the main source of support in the decision to pursue the path to priesthood, even though Giuseppe had also to assume the role as head of the family. Through great sacrifice and difficulties, he still managed to provide for his mother and siblings, never hesitating to assist anyone in need. He was ordained a priest in 1858. His first assignment was as a chaplain in the province of Padua. After 9 years, he was appointed to lead the parish of Salzano, Venice. As archpriest, he won general affection thanks to his commitment during emergencies such as the cholera epidemic and his generosity toward the poor. It was in Salzano that he began writing the work that would make him famous worldwide, a catechism in the form of question and answers, which would become a fundamental tool for the religious formation of generations of ordinary faithful. In 1875, he was appointed canon of Treviso Cathedral and chancellor of the diocese. Then he moved on to become bishop in 1884 of Mantua. And then, of course, he was then named pope. It's just a beautiful story of someone who just loved the church and loved Jesus so much and wanted to help people embrace the basics. Summary goes on to say he initiated major reforms of the Roman Curia, began codifying canon law, an unprecedented undertaking that lasted 20 years, reformed the rules for the conclave, many of which are still in force today, reorganized Vatican congregations, required bishops to reside in their dioceses and conduct regular pastoral visits, strengthened priestly formation by making seminary training mandatory, and fought against modernism to safeguard the purity of the faith and promoted biblical studies. He also changed the style of the papacy, introducing public audiences, sought to simplify ceremonies, and maintained a very humble lifestyle. 3 of his reforms are most renowned: the Catechism, famous for its clarity, simplicity, and effectiveness; the reform of sacred music, with the revival of Gregorian chant and liturgical music; the introduction of communion for children, allowing even the youngest, starting at age 7, to fully take part in the Eucharist, provided they understood the difference between ordinary bread and the consecrated bread, the body of Christ. He died on August 20th, 1914, as you heard in that Rome report, just days after the outbreak of the First World War. Pope Pius X had done everything in his power to prevent the conflict. This is a beautiful summary of our saint for today, and how many of us go on tours and go into St. Peter's, where he was buried, by the way. His body was moved from below in the crypt up to the main area of the church. I believe, if I'm remembering, it's on the right-hand side going up toward the Baldacchino. But how many of us stop at these tombs and look at just who's buried there and what they represent to us in the faith and what they have done to make sure that we keep our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Thank you, St. Pope Pius X. Pray for us. We'll be right back. "27 minutes past the hour. It is a Thursday morning, August 21st. Thanks for listening to Catholic in Action. Dr. Theresa Farnan is such a great resource. She is a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, focusing on the challenges of gender ideology as part of the Center's Person and Identity Project. She's a co-author of 2 books, Get Out Now, Why You Should Pull Your Children from Public School Before It's Too Late, and Where Did I Come From? Where Am I Going? How Do I Get There? She's the editor of Gender Ideology and Pastoral Practice, a handbook for Catholic clergy, counselors, and ministerial leaders, and co-authored 4 chapters. And she has a great teaching background as well, teaching at St. Paul Seminary in Pittsburgh, Franciscan in Steubenville, and Mount St. Mary Seminary. And she's also worked with the Diaconate Formation Program. Yay, my husband's a deacon, Teresa. I don't know if you knew that. The dioceses of Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all of your great work. All right, so the article that you wrote was just so, it was very important, but it's very, very disturbing in terms of what you went through with your youngest daughter. So let's start out there. The article was entitled Weeding Out Down Syndrome, which is in reference to a quote from the doctor with whom you were consulting on your pregnancy, right?
Yes. My first prenatal visit. So they generally try to push for prenatal screening now. It's earlier and earlier, so it's a 6-week visit, and it's a screening test. It's not diagnostic. It's just to say there might be a risk. So I went in there, and one of the doctors in our practice started pushing very aggressively, and I refused because I said, well, there's no point. What difference would it make? And she said to me, very annoyed, she said, it's to weed out Down syndrome. And I just remember being so angry, and I said, you're weeding out persons with Down syndrome, and no thank you.
What did she say when you said that? Because that's a perfect response. It's about killing people with Down syndrome, not weeding out Down syndrome itself.
Yes. She scoffed. She noted it on my chart, and that was the end of the visit. She was, but I think it was because I was older. I was not having any of her nonsense. I was in my 40s. I was like, you're not going to intimidate me. Just stop this. And so she just noted patient refused screening, and that was the end of the visit. And I did not see her again until I was in labor with my daughter, delivering my daughter with Down syndrome.
Wow.
And
then what happened?
But
Do
the reason
tell.
why I didn't see her was I chose. We had 6 to 8 practitioners in that group, and the rest of them were lovely. In fact, what happened was at the 20-week ultrasound, they realized that my daughter had a shortened nasal bridge, and so they called me in. And I remember the nurse saying, hey, we saw something on the ultrasound. And I said, I know, it's a high risk of Down syndrome. And there was a pause, and the nurse exhaled and said, I knew you would be good with this.
Aw.
And from that point on, the care was amazing, but it was because I didn't go back to that doctor.
So who ended up delivering your baby? Because there's a little bit of a twist to that, too.
Yes. So I went into labor, my water broke, and I went into the hospital, and wouldn't you know it, that doctor was on duty. And I almost asked for a different doctor, and then I thought, no, I think this woman needs to care for my baby. Because this is the baby she thought I shouldn't have. And so she cared for me until 20 minutes before I gave birth, and the doctor who rotated on was actually the doctor who helped craft a plan of care for the pregnancy once we found out the baby had Down syndrome. And so it was like very providential. I was very conflicted having her anywhere near my baby, but I kept thinking to myself, God has a plan, and maybe part of it is that she needs to see that we're not afraid, and she needs to have to care for my child.
Reading the entire article, what is so tragic is that weeding out Down syndrome, as you say here, though, the attitude means you're killing babies, right? But then what's really being missed is the kind of care that you had, and there can be a plan once they are diagnosed in utero and how to care for the baby in terms of, is there anything have to be done during the birthing process or afterward, how to best, and come up with a plan of care as opposed to just, we're just going to eliminate this life.
Right. No, that's exactly right. But I think it was beneficial being an older mother. Of course, you're at higher risk for having a child with Down syndrome. But I think the benefit was that I had the weekend to think about it, and I said, okay, what are the risks here? What do we have to worry about if this baby has Down syndrome? What is the worst case scenario? And the worst case scenario, obviously, is that the baby's born with a massive heart defect and has to have heart surgery. So by the time the doctors called me on Monday, I talked it over with my husband, and we said to them, we want a plan of care for this baby that is non-invasive, that will not hurt her, no amnio. I don't want to do anything that could cause a miscarriage, but I think it's very reasonable to do a fetal echo, right, and see if the baby's heart is okay. And if you want to do some labs, we can do lab work now. If you want to confirm it with a screening, fine, but we all both know what's going on here. And I think the doctors were relieved. It was like a plan of care where they could feel comfortable that they knew the worst case scenario. Now, my daughter does not have significant cardiac issues. She has some little things, but nothing that needed surgery. So from that point on, then, for both of us, we could relax. So the prenatal testing was good to be able to care for the baby. But the problem is the only reason why they're offering prenatal screening at 6 weeks is to facilitate abortion.
Right.
Because at that point, the mother's not attached to her baby.
It's another mechanism for abortion.
Yes. Yes. Because you're barely pregnant. You haven't even really gotten to know your baby. Most people don't know you're pregnant. And in my experience with many of my friends, with the friends of mine who knew that they were expecting a baby with Down syndrome, they experienced a tremendous amount of pressure from their doctors who would call them repeatedly saying, you need to schedule your abortion in the next 2 weeks.
They would call them repeatedly and do that?
They would call them repeatedly. I had one friend who every time she went in, they would say, so when do you want to schedule the termination?
Ugh. So much for do no harm, right?
Well, yeah. Well, and the point, I think the point that the doctors are making is like, well, of course you're going to want to have an abortion, and we need to make sure you do it while it's still legal, right? So there's tremendous pressure up until about 22 weeks to have this, to have an abortion, especially in states like I'm in Pennsylvania where, obviously it's a blue state, and so there would be, there aren't any restrictions on abortion like there are in some other states. So that's what you really have to worry about. And at the same time, the mother's very vulnerable because once you've had that diagnosis, you're painfully aware that you're carrying a child that the rest of society regards as not worth living. Mm. And so you're emotional anyway, and then you're bearing the weight of social disapproval.
Right. And these doctors, and I use that term loosely, think that they're doing you, a favor and helping you because they're encouraging you to have that abortion while it's still legal, and you're taking the easy way out. It'll be easier for you if you abort that child. We're talking with Theresa Farnan. She's a PhD, a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, focusing on the challenges of gender ideology as part of EPPC's Person and Identity Project. She's also taught at St. Paul's Seminary in Pittsburgh, at Franciscan and Mount St. Mary's, and she's co-authored or contributed to several books. We're discussing a very powerful article she wrote, and it's posted on California's Association of Natural Family Planning. The title is Prenatal Screening, Weeding Out Down Syndrome. And again, you can find it at canfp.org. We'll also tell you where else this article is posted. More on this issue when we come back on a Thursday. The title of Dr. Farnan's article, Prenatal Screening, Weeding Out Down Syndrome. Of course, the subtitle comes from a conversation she had with her doctor, which quickly changed things in terms of not being her doctor any longer, thanks be to God. That was 13 years ago, and her daughter, Annie, you were telling us, Theresa, during the break, she's like the center of attention in the family and at the parish and at the school. She's a dynamo. Adorable pictures of her in this article.
Oh, yeah, she's phenomenal. She's a wonderful human being. Absolutely amazing.
Did you ever take her back to meet the doctor who wanted her, quote unquote, terminated?
No. It's one of those things. You really. I remember reading an article about a different family with Down syndrome, and one of the lines the mother said was, "I love everyone who loves my daughter." Right, and you really do internalize that when you see someone who's kind to a child with disabilities. You can recognize they're a good person, but someone who's incapable of that, I just can't have them around my child.
Well, that's a good point. But see, the Italian in me wants to take this beautiful young woman and just stand her in front of the doctor and say, "See, meet my daughter Annie, the one you thought wasn't worth living." But that's just me.
The other thing that happened after Annie was born, several months afterwards, another family received a Down syndrome diagnosis in the same parish, and the doctor's office called me and said, this family just received a diagnosis, and they've never seen a baby with Down syndrome. Aww. Can they come over and see your baby? And so I said, sure, of course. So they came over, and this lovely couple just literally, they walked in the door, I handed them Annie, and they held her for half an hour. And then they handed her back and said, this is great, we can do it.
Aw, how beautiful. So see the difference that not only you're making with you talking about this, but the difference your child continues to make, right?
Yes. But this is one of the challenges we face, because as kids with Down syndrome are being screened out, fewer young people and fewer parents are familiar with kids with Down syndrome. They might have seen them in the special ed program, but they don't really know them. And so it's really hard for them to envision a good life. And so I think they're very vulnerable to this soft eugenics that's being promoted in our culture.
So in terms of this, as you said, the soft eugenics, but this messaging and these doctors being just having put so much pressure on so many women, pregnant women, what is going on in these medical schools in terms of getting them to this point where this has got to be done? We have to, quote unquote, weed out Down syndrome. Where's this coming from, do you think?
Yeah, it is coming from med school because it's being presented, in the not in every medical school, but in many medical schools. This is being presented in genetics, for example, as an example of a disease that you can eliminate through early screening and diagnosis. And so these med students walk in. Many med students do not come from a religious background. They're very science-minded. Younger people tend to be a little disaffiliated. And the first thing they hear is there is this thing called Down syndrome, and we can eliminate it by early diagnosis and screening. Well, what they're not saying is that what we're doing is we're screening out these babies and aborting them. And in fact, at some of the med schools, there are physicians who in their classes on embryology will toss out the notion, will propose the notion that you could eliminate Down syndrome by asking older mothers, like recommending that older mothers go through IVF and then screen their embryos and then discard the embryos that have Down syndrome. And that way we can get rid of Down syndrome. And we see this in countries around the world, right? Like, so Iceland has achieved a near universal elimination of Down syndrome because they're doing early prenatal screening and then abortions.
Yeah, that was a big story, actually, in CBS News. I remember you mentioned it in the article. Now, you talk about Dr. Brian Skotko, and he's done a lot of research in this area. He is a professor at Harvard Medical School and director of the Down Syndrome Center at Massachusetts General. Earlier this year, you're saying he published updated research on the prenatal experience of families and found that for many, the negative aspects of prenatal diagnosis were not only unimproved from earlier decades, but had worsened. He found that nearly 60%, 57% of parents reported their clinician inadequately explained Down syndrome after a prenatal diagnosis, causing 84% of parents to experience fear and 93% of parents to experience anxiety. Few received up-to-date or helpful resources, while many report feeling pressured to have an abortion. So the impression here, which you alluded to in the first part of the interview, Doctor, is that they have no interest in finding out more and how we can work with Down syndrome families. It is about eliminating, terminating babies with Down syndrome.
Yeah, and what's even more alarming is that you have all of these newer OB-GYNs coming in, these physicians coming in who don't have experience with kids with Down syndrome, who don't have any interest in this. And they, this is part of the shift in medicine from being a physician to being a provider. And if you're a provider, the goal is to make the patient happy. And so what they don't want to have is they don't want to have a family that has a child with Down syndrome and hasn't, is unhappy about it at birth. And so, the goal is, here we'll offer you early termination, abortion of your baby, and you can try again and then have the child that you want. It's just, when you take a step back and look at what's being promoted, it's horrifying. It is horrifying. And I remember saying at one point, in one of the conversations after Annie had her diagnosis, when they called me and said, we think she has Down syndrome, I said to the nurse, I said, well, I've never had a perfect child, and maybe Annie will be the closest, right? But there's this idea that parents have to have the perfect result. And so I think these physicians are very susceptible. Many of them do not know anyone with Down syndrome at all. And so to them, this is also a life not worth living. And then the other thing that happens is...
But who are they to decide it's a life not worth living? Who are they? Who made them God?
Well, there's a tendency when you get a diagnosis, they hand you the laundry list of everything that can go wrong. And if you're ever handed the laundry list of what can go wrong with a child with Down syndrome, it's horrifying. Because there's a lot that can go wrong. And then, there are a lot of ideas about kids with Down syndrome and how little they can achieve, right? Because people don't know kids with Down syndrome. So they think it's going to be a child who just sits in a corner with a severe heart defect, never talks, and doesn't interact. And that's like completely not the case. But what they're also not pointing out is that there is no child that has everything go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen ever. So there's just real ignorance on the part of the medical community. And unfortunately, Dr. Scottco's article indicated that it's getting worse, not better. And I think it's because we have these physicians coming up who have never met anyone with Down syndrome.
Is it pressure across the board in addition to Down syndrome, but other possible issues that may be diagnosed in utero, doctor? Because I know I was telling you of a friend of ours, his daughter, his youngest daughter is now, I don't know, she's 25. And when he and his wife were expecting, they have 5 children, a good Catholic couple. They were in the doctor's office, and they found out that she might have something deformed on her lip, maybe a cleft palate or something. And the physician, the OBGYN, a woman, just said, "Oh yeah, this is what we found," and handed them a brochure on abortion.
Yeah.
He got up and got up and walked out and never went back to that doctor. But it just seems to be, this whole idea of eugenics. It takes you back to Nazism in terms of this guy. Every child has to be absolute. Every child is perfect in God's eyes, right? But every child has to be perfect. There can't be anything. It's insane.
Yeah. But I think it's important to see that this is a different kind of eugenics. This isn't the state making people
right, because it's the parents making the decision. They're putting it on you, right?
They're putting it on you, and they put it on you by not giving you good information, by giving
scaring
no support.
Yeah.
Frightening the parents, presenting it as the most merciful choice. So it's a soft eugenics, but it still is eugenics nonetheless.
So what's being done to counter this, in addition to people like you speaking out?
On the part of the medical community, I think it's getting worse, not better. I think they're promoting it, not countering it. But I think for us as people who are pro-life, as people who, as Catholics, as, men and women of Christian faith or any faith, I think one of the most important things we can do is look at the families who get a diagnosis and really think about how to support them. I have to tell you, one of the worst things when I was carrying my daughter was hearing people who would find out that we were having a child with diagnosis, and they would give us sad eyes and say they were sorry. And no mother needs to hear that. That is not what you need to hear. What you need to hear is concrete, recommendations or questions, or how can I help you, or sort of like, I have a friend, her daughter's doing great, she's a wonderful child. What can we do to help? That's what they need to hear. They don't need to hear the message of sympathy and condolence. Because this is and I can remember, at one point after Annie was born, going to see the director of the Down syndrome clinic here in Pittsburgh, who's just wonderful. And I walked in, and Annie was having some health issues, and he, was put me at ease immediately. And then in the note that he wrote for her record, the first line said, "Anne is a beautiful baby." Aww. And I still remember that, right? I remember what my OB-GYN said to me, when she was screening, and I remember seeing that written in my daughter's chart, and I thought, that is amazing, because right there, he counteracted the narrative. And so, that is what we're called to be doing. We need to be, giving a lot of support to families, yes, but also reaffirming publicly the value of these children. And it's only going to get worse with the prenatal screening and with the IVF conversations and controversy about IVF, because the first thing they screen out with IVF is Down syndrome. So there are concrete ways you can support it by promoting programs for kids with special needs in Catholic schools, by, very, very concrete ways to get involved and to help out and to make a difference.
Where would you suggest people go for information on this issue, Doctor?
I would say, I think probably one of the best places to go is to go to Brian Scottco's website, because he's got a lot of research there. There's a lot of good information on the National Down Syndrome Congresses, but I'm really a little bit leery about those, because they take a very ambivalent position about abortion and prenatal screening. They won't get involved with the issue, which is just insane to me. The other place that is a great place for us to start is the National Catholic Partnership for Disabilities. And that is a wonderful organization. It covers not only disabilities like Down syndrome, but also autism, mental health issues, you name it. So that would be, I think for Catholics, I think that should be our go-to place. they'll know where to go for specialists for help with, like, catechesis, for concrete programs. They have conventions and conferences every year. So that would be my recommendation.
I did find while you were chatting, not that I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying, but Brian's website, Brian Skotko, SKOTKO.com, BrianSkotko.com. He can also be found at Massachusetts General Hospital within that website, but he has his own website dedicated to his great work, as you mentioned, director of the Down Syndrome Program at Massachusetts General. So God bless him and bless his heart. And I also think, too, going to those Catholic groups that you mentioned are super important. And challenging, I think, the culture and the media. I never forget there was this story about this beautiful young woman with Down. She's a teenager, but she's also a model. And there's been several stories about her in the news. Very positive stories. But yet the media they never mention in those stories, Theresa, about how many babies, Down syndrome babies, are aborted. They never mention that. Connect the dots, for crying out loud. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. There is no discussion of it. I think people want to... they want to memory hole it. They'll push back and they'll say, even if you bring up the eugenic aspect, they don't want to hear it. And we need to keep pushing that issue forward.
We do, and we're glad that you are. Thank you for sharing this very important article with us and your great work. And again, you can find the article that we were discussing on the California Association of Natural Family Planning. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, wrapping up a Thursday morning edition, second hour number 2, or as we say in Italian, Due, August 21st, 2025, tomorrow. Doug Keck joining us, as he always does, our President Emeritus and Chief Operating Officer Emeritus, joins us with the inside word to let you know what's coming up this weekend and next week, give you a sneak peek, or the inside word, as we like to say, on the network. Fact Check Friday, which is where we take a look at the media. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. Things about which you should be informed in terms of how the media work. As Archbishop Chaput always says, we need to know how the media work so they don't work on us. I'm just so grateful that we have EWTN, that we can talk about these issues. I was just talking to my producer, Richard, about these elitists out there, these doctors pressuring these moms and making these decisions. I was telling you, you heard my friend Chuck, who had that situation with his daughter, and they got up and they walked out. It's like, who do you think you are? Who made you God? And that attitude, it just really gets my Italian up. Anyway, I'm grateful for Dr. Theresa and for the opportunity to talk about those issues. And we will continue to do that because we are your pro-life radio network. All right. Continuing with our rundown, as we say, for the Friday show, our second hour. This hour we'll be interviewing Leah Hunt. She'll be in studio with us, finding ways to bring glory to God through trials. So that comes up tomorrow. Have a great Thursday. We'll talk to you tomorrow on a Friday. Mary, Queen of Peace, pray for us. Pope Pius X, St. Pope Pius, pray for us.